Hello, beautiful people. I'm Zachary Adama, transformational guide and healer. Today, we're going to be talking about the energy of the June new moon. I'm going live today. I have better internet finally where I can actually do it in a way that makes sense and that has decent quality, and I have a decent camera now. So, hopefully, I'll be doing more of these videos lives to have a little more, authenticity and spontaneity when I'm making these videos. What I wanted to talk about today is the themes for this energetic corridor of the June new moon. And the energy of this new moon is kind of a culmination in a lot of ways of the energy of the whole year. And throughout this year, there's been some major themes that are really starting to come into focus about what 2022 has been all about. And for me, and I think for a lot of people, in the collective. A lot of 2022 has been about cultivating the quality of loving awareness. And this is a very old spiritual notion. This is a state of awareness that, for instance, you find extensively in things like Tibetan Buddhism, where that is seen as the highest quality that you can really aspire towards cultivating. And I find that I've been working on that throughout this year, deepening my capacity to embody loving awareness and noticing and identifying all those things within myself that have kept me from doing that. That the parts of myself that numb out, that the parts of myself that have been judgmental, just getting deeper and deeper into identifying those things that really keep me from embodying those qualities, healing them, and trying to move forward in a way that is more loving and more present. So, that is a big theme that has been going on throughout this year. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But another theme that seems to be coming up is this idea of community, the beloved community, spiritual community, true community where there is deep trust, community where there is deep alignment, this feeling of safety, this feeling of home. So that's one of the other themes. In addition to that, there are themes that seem to deal a lot with personal power, personal sovereignty, personal healing, meeting our individual needs. And the first one of those that came to me around that is this idea of owning all the queer parts of ourselves. And this is Pride Month in June, and that time of the year, those festivals, that whole movement has really been about owning your queerness, owning those things about yourself that are different from the quote mainstream, and really embracing those things and embodying those things and living in the world, chest out and proud of who and what you are, all those aspects of yourself. The final theme that seems to deal with this notion of personal power, personal sovereignty, being fully alive, being fully human, is this idea of nourishing those thirsty parts of ourselves, those parts of ourselves that are in need of love, that are in need of attention, that are in need of more awareness. I'll start with that first thing we talked about, this notion of loving awareness and embodying more loving awareness. There are all sorts of patterns of being and behaving and thinking that we engage in that are unconscious and that are unloving. And we might not even necessarily be aware of them. And It's one of those things you're not aware of them until you have the gift of contrast of knowing what it's like to have more of it, to actually embody and experience that level of consciousness that is more aware and more loving. The one of the reasons I do ceremonial and medicine work is because it gives me the gift of contrast of what that next level of consciousness looks like and feels like, and gives me pointers, gives me teachings to help me embody that more and more. And recently, what I've been working with, what I've been exploring, what I've been seeking to understand and heal is those things that cause me to numb out, those things that cause me to be less present. And what keeps coming up is the things that are unpleasant, the things that are difficult, the things that are traumatic, my everyday life, my collective experience, that just cause me to grow numb because you can only handle so much pain. You can only handle so much suffering before you start to withdraw into yourself, before you start to disassociate from your environment and your relationships with people. And it's an interesting dance to do because you also have to have compassion for yourself. Often we will find ourselves in difficult situations. We'll find ourselves in relationship with difficult people. And you have one or two approaches you can take when you find yourself in a difficult relationship or with difficult circumstances. You can really remain as fully present with it as you can, as fully conscious with it as you can, and just bring presence and love to the situation, to the person, to the relationship, and hold yourself in the fire, so to speak, of that situation and that relationship, and trust that your awareness will transmute it in some way. Trust that your awareness will help you heal the situation in some way. And I've always been pretty good at that, and maybe too good at that. Maybe my pain threshold is too high. Maybe I'm just too stubborn. But I tend to hold myself in the fire probably longer than most people, maybe longer than I should. When I'm in relationship with a difficult person, I don't typically end that relationship quickly. In fact, I will stay present with that person, with that relationship, often for a long time, and just sit with the difficulty and the discomfort of it. And that's because I'm a healer. You know, I feel like as long as we're in relationship, there is an opportunity for healing. And as long as there is an opportunity for healing, I want to be there. I want to be present for it. But I'm noticing that I might be physically present in a lot of those circumstances, but I'm not always emotionally present. And I'm not always paying attention really as much as I should. So, for instance, you in a conversation with a difficult person, and it can be hard to pay attention. It can be hard to listen. And so you kind of zone out, sort of disassociate a little bit, not really hearing their words, not really being with them. Physically present, but you're not really spiritually or emotionally present or mentally present. And I've been looking at that and thinking about that. You know, is that the right thing to do? Should I try to be more present or have compassion for myself and recognize that I'm just not able to be, and that I'm not really doing either of us much good by being physically present and uncomfortable and numb in a situation that I simply am enduring. And that the healing opportunity that I hoped to bring about by staying in relationship is being denied because I'm not really present. I'm not really in relationship. I'm just enduring. So that's an example of what one of the things I'm working with right now is this cultivation of loving awareness and noticing those things and those places and those times when I'm numbing out, when I'm not actually present, when I'm not really having compassion for myself because it's more than I can stay present with. So that is one of the aspects of things that I'm working with, and I see the ways in which that has collective implications. We live in a world with so much suffering. We live in a world with a lot of difficulty, difficult people, difficult situations. And as things happen in the collective, you have that opportunity and invitation to be present with it, to be conscious and compassionate, and truly feeling all the pain, feeling all the suffering. Or you have the option to numb out, to disassociate, to be physically present, but emotionally and spiritually and mentally checked out. And the question arises, is that really doing anyone any good? As far as the collective is concerned, it's hard to get out of that situation because you're a part of it as long as you're in a human body. And as long as you're in a human body, you sort of have to dance with these qualities of remaining present and not numbing out and disassociating amidst all the difficulty. We're in a time as a collective where it's hard to see the ways in which things are going to get dramatically better anytime soon. It's always possible. We can always choose it. But it's really difficult to see the ways in which the suffering is going to end anytime soon. In fact, we're at a place as a collective where it looks like the suffering is going to intensify. It's going to be more difficult, more uncomfortable. And in this experience, as a human in a human body on this planet, experiencing difficulty and discomfort and pain and suffering, how do you stay in your compassionate heart? How do you continue to show up in relationship with people, communities, and the collective as an awake, conscious human being, and not just showing up physically, just to say you were there, but truly showing up in every sense of the word? I don't know the answers to this because I'm figuring it out myself. I'm practicing it myself. I'm practicing being compassionate and present amidst the suffering, to being involved even though it hurts, to being an advocate for the good even though it often feels hopeless. So that's one aspect of this energy for this new moon, for this entire month, is this idea of being compassionate and present, even though it's hard, even though it's difficult. And in order to continue doing that, I think there is this need for personal boundaries in order to remain present and compassionate. Because every one of us has a breaking point at which we contract and we get numb and we stop showing up. We all have that breaking point. And the dance we do is that we stay involved, we stay in relationship, we stay present as long as we can until we start numbing out, until we start withdrawing internally, until we stop being compassionate, until our judgments start closing our heart. And when we get to that point, when our judgments have closed our heart, our suffering has closed our heart, and we're numbing out, we're not present, that's when we have to withdraw. That's when we need a little peace. We need a little spaciousness. We need a little safety in order to get our sensitivity back, in order to get back in our body, in order to get present again in our body, to get present again in our life, to become compassionate again. And once we nourish ourselves, and that's another theme that we'll be talking about. Once we nourish ourselves enough to show back up in our life as a conscious and compassionate human being, then we get involved again. We get involved in relationship, we get involved in community, we get involved with the collective. We bring as much loving awareness as we can to our lives until the suffering gets to us again, numbs us out again. And we check out and start all over. This is a theme throughout this year that has really intensified. It's a theme that will continue throughout this year and beyond. This is a teaching that I think we need to continually practice and refine, probably for the rest of our time in a human body. This dance between compassion and awareness, noticing when we're numb, noticing when we've withdrawn, noticing when we're contracted, finding some peace, retreating, healing, and then trying again. Another thing I've been dancing with this year, and which seems to be really coming into focus around this new moon, is this idea of community. I've lived where I live currently in central Kentucky for about 10 years. And during that time, I've been very active in all sorts of things in the community. I've been a leader in the community. I've been very busily involved in community. But I've never felt a part of community, if that makes sense to you. I never really felt a part of it. I felt like I was in it, but not a part of it, and I was just doing the best I could. And the whole time I was doing that, it's been very difficult. It's been quite uncomfortable, and I haven't really felt a deep alignment there. And it's been a lot of efforting. And what I recognize, what I realize is that, you can't do community alone. And you can't be a part of community, feel like you're really in it, a part of it, unless there's a deeper alignment and resonance with the community you're in. We often try to make the best of a difficult situation, and I think that's our duty to do, is to make the best of difficult situations, to try to be as involved as we can be in whatever community we find ourselves in, to serve the good of all. But you can only really survive in that context. And over the last decade, I've really just been surviving in community that I did not feel a part of. I didn't really find that I was being nourished by it. Because I wasn't being nourished by it, it was unable to really truly support me in a way that brings about abundance on every level of being. And as you all know, at the beginning of this year, things really started shifting for me dramatically. And it became clear that my time living in this community was coming to an end because it really taught me everything it could. And it had become clear that there was a lack of alignment and I'd outgrown it and I wasn't being nourished by it. So I started looking for new community. What will the new community look like for the next phase of my life? Community of people who truly see me and who can appreciate me and whom I love and appreciate and see and trust. And my first adventure or dance with that of trying to find a community for that next chapter was going down to Austin, Texas. And there's so many beautiful people there. Just so many absolutely beautiful people there. But what I'm noticing and what I've noticed is that that is beautiful community and that's a beautiful place and there's all this energy and you got millions of people down there at this point and it's one of the fastest growing cities in the country. It nourished me in some ways, but there was some toxicity in the soil, so to speak, that came up very quickly and that really kept me from being able to truly thrive in that environment in a sustainable way. And the image that keeps coming to me is that of the seed growing into a tree. You know, the first 18 years of my life, I was the seed growing into a little plant, a little sapling. And I did that in my hometown in East Kentucky, my family there. And that was difficult soil to grow in. And the difficulty of that soil gave me a certain amount of resilience, maybe a certain amount of hardiness that is really needed and that I really appreciate. It was exactly what I needed, but it was always difficult. It was always difficult to grow in that soil. And so it was very uncomfortable. And so as soon as I could, I moved. Went off to college, came to Central Kentucky, and did all my college and law school here. Did 10 years of professional life here. And that soil has been good for the sapling to start growing and growing and growing and starting to grow into maturity as a tree. But again, the soil's not been quite right for putting down deep roots. Even though I've owned business here, I've owned a house here, I've been a professional in the community and all that stuff, been a leader in the community, I never felt quite a part of it. I always felt resistance to it. It never really nourished me. I never really had abundance on every level of being, of relationships and all that stuff. I would be a leader in the community, but have no close friends nearby. That's what most of the last decade's been like. And I'm noticing that. I say, that was what I needed for this phase of my life. That was what I needed for this phase. But it's not my permanent home. And it's not the place for me to put down deep roots. So Austin, a lot of sunlight down there. A lot of sunlight. But that sunlight can be brutal. And the soil there is not great either. It's kind of a desert. Not a lot of water down there. So it doesn't feel like a good place to put down deep roots, though it's got a lot of light, a lot of sunlight, a lot of power, a lot of money down there, a lot of influential people down there. But it's not quite right. There's a certain amount of brutality to that energy, a lack of compassion in that energy that caused me not to really feel safe, feel like I could really be a part of it. And this other community I've been dancing with since the beginning of this year, visiting, doing ceremonial work with, is in the Asheville, North Carolina area. Asheville is in the Appalachian Mountains, which is where I grew up. And it's actually technically a rainforest there. All sorts of beautiful old growth trees and water and mountains, and the energy there is just fantastic. And I'm noticing that for at least the last 6 years, it seems like, that place and I have been courting one another. I've been going there to visit for various retreats. I've made a lot of really beautiful friends and relationships. And there's developed this level of trust and respect and home that's been developing between us over the years. And what I came to realize over the weekend is this is the place for me to put down deep roots. This is the place for me to be truly a part of community. This is a place that can sustain and nourish me in a good way that leads to abundance on every domain of life. And without community, you can't have true abundance. You just can't do it. So we're courting one another, and it becomes increasingly apparent that that's the next container for the sapling growing into maturity to really put its roots down deep, continue to grow for the long term. Community is something we all search for. It's something that we need as human beings. Without community, we're not fully human. You can't be fully human without community. It's just not possible. You can't be fully known without community. You can't really know yourself without community because you don't have good mirrors. A lot of us are searching for community. A lot of us are searching for greater mutual understanding. A lot of us are searching for people we trust. We are in chaotic times. We're in difficult times. We are in times where things are getting quite weird. And I think it's more important than ever that we have community around us, because in community we're resilient. It's this idea that the lone wolf dies alone. When things become really difficult, you need to be surrounded by people you love and trust. You need to be surrounded by people who can nourish and support you, who accept every part of you, who love every part of you. And that's what I'm finding, that's what I'm feeling in that community. And I'd be curious to know how you're searching for community, how you're showing up in community. Wherever you are at, wherever you live, you have community around you. You have the larger community of the city or the town. Then you have the smaller communities within it. And there's all sorts of opportunities to show up and be in those communities. But how are you showing up? For my part, I was incredibly active in my community where I live now for a long time. I tried all these various other smaller communities within it. And I reached a point in towards the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, where the community was really starting to make me sick. The energy of the community I was in and those relationships and things like that were really starting to make me sick. I'd get a headache when I would go to certain board meetings and things like that because of the distance between my energy and their energy. And it was just really uncomfortable. And because it was uncomfortable, because it caused that level of dissonance in the body, I started withdrawing my roots. I started going inward, going into that hermit phase, withdrawing from friendships and relationships that I'd had for a long time because they were no longer nourishing me. And in fact, they had become a bit toxic. So I went inward, 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 withdrawing, withdrawing, withdrawing. And as I withdrew, as I started to cocoon, I recognized, this is no longer supporting me. We need to move somewhere. I don't know where, but I need to go somewhere else. And then this year, 2022, I've been trying these various larger communities, these larger geographic communities. Austin, a lot of light down there, but it's a bit brutal. The soil's a little toxic, so it's not quite for me. Somewhere to visit, certainly, but maybe not somewhere to live. Asheville, on the other hand, is feeling really good. And when I go there and I can feel the spirit of the Appalachian Mountains, it feels like mother. And then I see all these beautiful families and communities there. It's like, these are people that I want to know for a long time. These are people that I'm really enjoying seeing how their life is unfolding. These are people that I want to help and be there for. These are people that I would be honored. If I need help, they help me. It's a community that I feel like I have a lot of peers in, people that I have things to learn from, people that I have things to offer. Feels like a very balanced sort of place to be. The other theme that has come up and been coming up is this idea of owning all the queer parts of ourselves. As I said, it's Pride Month. And that whole movement has been built around this idea of owning, being proud of all the queer parts of yourself. The kinkiness, everything you might be ashamed of just saying, this is who and what I am, and I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm proud of it. I'm not going to lie to anyone about it and be other than I am. And we all have, quote, queer parts of ourselves. It's not limited to sexuality or gender identification, though that's a huge part of it, because that's one of the things that so many people feel shame around and hide, because there's so much judgment out there. There's so much stigma out there. And then that encourages people to hide those parts of themselves. But we all have queer parts of ourselves, and we all have those parts of ourselves that we've swept under the rug, not looked at, and just said, well, that's part of me, but, it's inconvenient to express it. And for a lot of us, that may be spirituality, spirit, your new aginess, your spiritual seeking, your belief in things that the mainstream might consider odd. Those are all queer parts of yourself that you maybe have tucked under the rug and hidden, and not fully expressed and fully embodied and been proud of. Well, we're getting to this time where you can only express a certain level of vitality in life when you're hiding the parts of yourself that are most interesting, the parts of yourself that make you unique. As long as you're hiding your queerness in that way, you're not really showing up in your life. You're not showing up in community. You're not showing up in relationship. You're just sort of a shadow. Your body's there, but you aren't there physically. You're not there mentally, and you're not there spiritually. So identify those queer parts of yourself, those oddities about yourself that you've had some shame around, some places of resistance about embodying and fully expressing. And resurrect them. Shine the light on them. Embody them. Own them. Be them. Another idea that's come to me around this new moon, in which, we weaved it through our talk earlier about loving awareness and community, was this idea of nourishing the thirsty parts of yourself. We all have those parts of our being, those aspects of our being that haven't been nourished. We all have those aspects of our being that haven't had sufficient love and attention and light. Something I've been reflecting on recently is that throughout my entire life, I've had to be strong for other people. I've had to be strong for other people who weren't necessarily in a position to nourish me. It'd be difficult people, difficult relationships, different things like that. My family who loves me a lot, but doesn't really see me or really understand me, or certainly don't have the financial resources to help me. They love me and they give me that love, and that love is beautiful and appreciated and nourishing. But in a lot of ways, the relationship's not nourishing because there's really no intimacy there because they can't really see me. And so that's a thirsty part of myself, that desire for intimacy that they weren't able to meet. And that's played out in other relationships that I have. There's a certain level of love there and mutual support, but there's a lack of intimacy there because they can't really see or appreciate me fully. And so it's not very nourishing. And that desire for community that I've always had, again, it's a desire for community, and I've been in various communities, but I've not felt a part of them because there's a lack of resonance. Again, they didn't really see me, didn't really appreciate me. And so I wasn't really nourished by it. I was giving, but not really nourished. And I'm finding I need to be in relationships. I need to be in community that sees me and that nourishes me in order to continue growing, in order to experience abundance in every domain of my life. Not just financial, not just professional, but in abundance in my relationships. Relationships with abundant trust, abundant love, and intimacy. All right, my friends, I think that's all I have to say about this June new moon. Continue to cultivate loving awareness. Notice your judgments. Notice where you're numbing out. When you numb out, you're not present. When you're judging, you're not loving. So notice that. And when you find that you're in a difficult situation and you are numbing out or you are judging, it may be that you need to exercise some compassion for yourself and withdraw from it for a bit. Go heal. Go nourish yourself. Then show back up. Try to be loving and aware. Community is so important. Continue to try to find it. Continue to try to find good soil that can nourish you and help you continue to grow. It may be that there is community in your larger community where you live that can do that for you. It may be that you need to find a different city or town that can support you more fully. But continue to listen and continue to look for communities that nourish you, that see you. A part of being seen is showing up in your life as your full self. It means owning your queerness, whatever queerness means to you, however that's expressed in and through you. All those parts of yourself that you may have been ashamed of, all those parts of yourself that have been hidden, exhuming them and giving them some sunlight and owning them and saying, this is who and what I am. I know that in order to have true intimacy, I have to be fully seen and fully known. And the discomfort of the fear of my embarrassment or whatever is the price I'm willing to pay. And finally, nourish yourself. Nourish all the thirsty parts of yourself, whatever those may be, and however they're showing up for you. Nourish yourself. Find good soil to continue to grow. as we go into this next cycle of growth and evolution. All right, my friends, until next time, be peaceful, loving, and fearless. Infinite blessings. Namaste.